by Daf Ayin Dalid Amud Aleph towards the top. So where it says Tashema, second line. So the question of the Gemara on the previous Daf asked the question, what's the halacha with regarding an arel eating maaser? Can an arel have maaser? We know that an arel cannot have truma, an arel cannot have korban pesach. What about maaser? So we're talking about maaser sheni. Yeah, the question is an arel allowed to have it or not? We're trying to figure it out. So says the Gemara, Tashema. Nishtairu bo tzitzin ha'ma'akivin et hamila. Somebody, he didn't meet milah, but there are parts that were left that are ma'akiv. So it's considered like he didn't do it because he didn't take off the right parts. Hareze eno ochel lo b'truma v'lo b'pesach v'lo b'kodashim v'lo b'maaser. It says he cannot eat a few things. Number one, he cannot eat truma, he cannot eat pesach, he cannot eat kodshim, and he cannot eat maaser. So it sounds like we have our answer that an arel cannot eat maaser. My love maaser dagan. Aren't we talking about maaser of grains? So the Gemara says, lo, maaser behema. The Gemara says, no, that's not talking about maaser of grain, that's talking about maaser of behema. So the Gemara says, one second, maaser behema hainu kodshim. It says in the Braita kodshim, and it also says maaser. So kodshim is maaser behema is included in kodshim. So this maaser must mean something else. So the Gemara says, ultamech milo tanad pesach v'katani kodshim. Well, it also says pesach and it also says kodashim. So the Gemara says, no, bishlama pesach v'kodashim tzrichi. I needed to say pesach and I also needed to say kodashim, even though pesach is a type of kodashim. Why? Deitana pesach mishum darlut bepesach ktiva. Aval kodashim emalo. If it would have just said pesach, so I would have thought, because it says in the Torah that an arel cannot eat korban pesach. But I would have thought other kodashim an arel can eat it. Ve'itana kodashim havaminu my kodashim pesach. If it would have just said kodashim, I would have thought that when it says kodashim, it means pesach, but not other kodashim. So therefore, it needs to say both kodashim and pesach on the list. Yeah, right. But if you're going to tell me maaser means maaser behema, that should be part of kodashim. Why should I need to say it separately? So the Bach changes this word from ella to vedilma. So the Gemara says, okay, vedilma maaser rishon. Maybe when it says maaser, it's not talking about maaser behema, it's talking about maaser rishon. We're trying to prove that an arel cannot have maaser sheni. So we have a braita here that says arel cannot have maaser. So the Gemara says maybe that's talking about maaser rishon. Ve'Rebbi Meir he damar maaser rishon asur lezarim, and it's going according to the opinion of Rebbi Meir that a zar is not allowed to have maaser rishon, and so too an arel would not be allowed to have maaser rishon. But maaser sheni, maybe an arel could have. So we still don't have our answer. Can an arel have maaser sheni? So the Gemara says another try. Tashema meditani Rabbi Chia barav midifti arel asur b'shtei maasrot. We have a teaching from Rabbi Chia barav that says an arel cannot have two maasers. So my lav echad maaser dagan ve'echad maaser behema. So the Gemara says it's talking about one is maaser of grain, one is maaser of behema. So you see, maaser of grain, a maaser sheni, and arel cannot have it. So the Gemara says, no, hachanami maaser rishon, Rebbe Meir. Maybe this also is talking about maaser rishon and not maaser sheni. So we still don't have a proof that an arel cannot have maaser sheni. Tashema.
You mean maaser sheni is as a more considered of maaser sheni?
No, maybe we're trying to prove that we're trying to figure out whether an arel is allowed to have maaser sheni or not. We tried a couple of proofs, but these proofs, the Gemara is getting around it and saying maybe that is a proof that an arel cannot have maaser rishon. We want to know, can an arel have maaser sheni, that the fruits that he has to take up to Yerushalayim or be podeh on money and take up to the Yerushalayim and buy and eat there. Is an arel allowed to have that? So says the Gemara further. Tashema onen asur b'maaser mutar b'truma uvpara. Okay, so this braita we're gonna say someone who's asur to one thing, but he's mutar to two other things. So onen asur b'maaser, and onen is not allowed to eat maaser. Umutar b'truma upara, and onen is allowed to eat truma, and he's also allowed to deal with the ashes of para aduma. Tivul yom, someone who became tameh, and he went to the mikveh, but he did not yet wait until nighttime. So he's called tivul yom, right? There's
even earlier.
he went to the mikveh during the daytime in order to be able to eat terumah. Yeah, he could go to the mikveh, and you're supposed to go to the mikveh during the daytime, but he doesn't become fully tahor until nighttime, or depending on what type of tumah he has. But at least when it comes to eating truma, he has to wait till nighttime. So tivul yom, asur b'truma, he's not allowed to eat truma until nighttime. Umutar bepara uvmaaser, but he's allowed to, since he doesn't have to do any more action to make himself tahor, so he's considered tahor at least as far as para aduma, and he can also eat maaser. He just cannot have truma. Mechusar kippurim is somebody who he needs to bring a korban also as part of his process of becoming tahor. So there he needs to do an action to become tahor. So asur bepara umutar bitruma uvmaaser. He's not allowed to deal with para aduma because he's tameh and he needs to bring a korban to become fully tahor. But he is allowed to eat teruma, and he's allowed to have maaser because he went to the mikveh and he waited until nighttime. He just still has to bring a korban, so he's allowed to eat truma and maaser, but he's not allowed to eat para. Now the Gemara says v'im ita, if it's true that an arel is allowed to eat maaser, so nidni, it should be included. We should write also on this list arel asur b'truma mutar b'para maaser. We should say an arel he's not allowed to eat truma, but he's allowed to do with para aduma and maaser. It fits on the list, so why don't we put that on the list? So the fact that it's not on the list, the Gemara wants to say, shows that an arel is not allowed to eat maaser, because if an arel was allowed to eat maaser, it should have been on this list. So says the Gemara, Haitana debe Rabbi Akiva. This braita is going according to Rabbi Akiva. Demar bile le'arel ketameh. That Rabbi Akiva holds that an arel has the status of a tameh, and therefore an arel would not be allowed to deal with the para aduma either, because he would have the status of a tameh like we had on the previous amud, and therefore won't fit into the structure of this list. The Tanya, Rabbi Akiva Omer ish lerabot arel. Rabbi Akiva, we had this drasha a number of times. The pasuk says ish ve'utzaru ha'ozav. We're talking about people who have types of tuma. They're not allowed to eat teruma. So Rabbi Akiva learns from the word ish that it's coming to include an arel also is not allowed to eat from truma, because an arel is like a tameh. So that braita is going according to Rabbi Akiva. Therefore, we cannot learn from it. Okay, now says the Gemara, Uman Tana de Palig ale de Rabbi Akiva. Who's the Tana that argues with Rabbi Akiva? Tana de Be Yosef Habavlihi. It's Tana de Be Yosef Habavli. The Tanya. It's the Tanakama of this braita of Yosef Habavli. It says. One second, they changed something over here. Okay, Serefa Onen Umechusar Kippurim. So burning the para aduma and Onen and Mechusar Kippurim Keshera. Serefat Onen Mechusar Kippurim Keshera. That if an Onen or Mechusar Kippurim they burn, I believe we're talking about para aduma, it's kasher. Okay. Rabbi Yosef Abavli Omer Onen Keshera Mechusar Kippurim Pesula. Rabbi Yosef Abavli, he teaches that if an Onen burns the para aduma, so that's kasher, because he's not tameh at all. But if a Mechusar Kippurim, someone who he's tameh and he needs to bring a korban to fully become tahor, if he deals with the para aduma, so that's pasul. Right. So how is this? Right. Meaning, the point is that he's since he has to do an action to become tahor, so that's the machloket here. Meaning one more time. So we're talking about someone burning ashes.
Explain that. Explain. What's happening?
Yeah. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to find who argues with Rabbi Akiva. We're trying to find the thing that argues with Rabbi. What does Rabbi Akiva say? Rabbi Akiva says that an arel is like a tameh. Okay, with regard to certain halachot, an arel is like a tameh. He can't eat truma because he's like a tameh. He can't eat. Yeah. So the Gemara wants to bring. The truth is, I think the Rishonim struggle a lot to figure out exactly how this is going against Rabbi Akiva. But let's just read Rashi inside. So Rabbi Akiva said, the Gemara says, who goes against Rabbi Akiva? This Braita. And the Braita says, Serefat onen mechusar kippurim keshera. That if an onen or mechusar kippurim burns the ashes of paraduma, it's kasher. So let's just read Rashi. Tana de Yosef HaBavlihi. So Rashi says, Tanakama de Yosef HaBavli. That first opinion in the Braita of Yosef HaBavli, that's the one that argues with Rabbi Akiva. Damar mechusar kippurim kasher bepara. He holds that somebody who became tameh and he has he has to bring a korban to finalize becoming tahor. So the Tanakama here of Rabbi Yosef HaBavli holds that he is allowed to deal with the ashes of the para. He's allowed to deal with para aduma. V'hamatnita de'ukimna kerbi akiva katani mechusar kippurim pasul bepara. That argues with Rabbi Akiva because Rabbi Akiva held that a mechusar kippurim, someone who he has to bring a korban to become tahor, he's not allowed to deal with the ashes of para. V'chehecha de paliga mechusar kippurim. The same way they have a machloket regarding someone who is a mechusar kippurim who has to bring a korban to become tahor. Ika lememar dihu palig nami. Alea be'arel le'el. We're going to say that they also have a machloket regarding arel. Okay, but either way, let's go back in the Gemara where it says Va'af Rabbi Yitzchak Savar Arel Asur b'Maaser. So Rabbi Yitzchak also holds that an arel is asur to have maaser. Ta'amar Rabbi Yitzchak Minayin le'arel she'asur b'Maaser. How do we know that an arel cannot have maaser? Ne'emar mimenu b'maaser v'ne'emar mimenu b'pesach. It says by maaser mimenu. It says lo biarti mimenu b'tameh. It says the word mimenu. And by korban pesach also it says the word mimenu. It says al tochlu mimenu na. So ma mimenu ha'amur b'pesach arel asur bo. Just like it says mimenu by pesach. And we know that an arel is not allowed to have korban pesach. Boker tov. Af mimenu ha'amur b'maaser arel asur bo. Also, when it says arel by maaser, when it says mimenu by maaser, we learn from korban pesach that an arel is asur to have maaser as well. And the Gemara says mufni. It must be that those words, the mimenu that we're learning from, are open. They're available to make a gzera shava. De'ilo mufni, because if they're used for different drashot and they're not available for this gzera shava, so ikale mifrach male pesach sheken chayavin alav mishum pigul venotar v'tameh. We could ask on this that you cannot really learn maaser from Pesach because Pesach is more strict. Because Pesach you're chayav pigul notar tameh. If he has the wrong machshavot, he has the wrong thoughts, or there's leftover, not allowed to be leftover, or tameh cannot have it. Whereas by maaser, these things don't apply. So basically, we're saying like this. We're saying we have a limud. It says mimenu by Pesach and mimenu by maaser. So we connect the two and we say, okay, just like by Pesach, an arel is not allowed to eat korban Pesach. Also, an arel cannot have maaser. Maaser sheni we're talking about. So the Gemara says it must be that those mimenu words that you're trying to use to make gzera shava are available to make this gzera shava. Because if not, if they're used for other drashot, so then you can't really learn maaser from Pesach because Pesach is more strict than maaser. So you can't learn just because an arel cannot have Pesach, an arel cannot have maaser. It's not true. It must be that these words are available to make this gzera shava. So says the Gemara, la'aye afnuye mufne. The Gemara says it is available. It has to be available. So my mufne, well, which one is available? So Amar Rava, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Telata mimenu ktivi bePesach. 3 times it says mimenu by Pesach. It says, Al tochlu mimenu na, uvashel mevushal b'mayim, ki'im tziliesh. And then it says, Lo totiru mimenu ad boker. Then another time it says mimenu. You can't leave it over until the morning. You have to finish the whole thing. And then v'hanotar mimenu ad boker ba'esh tisrofu. That if there's any left over, you have to burn it.
What mimenu means in here?
From the korban.
From?
Yeah. So 3 times says mimenu. So chad legufe. One of them is for itself, meaning referring to the korban pesach. It says al tochlu mimenu na. You cannot eat it raw. So that's teaching me that only applies to korban pesach and not to matzah and maror. Tosfot says, because the pasuk says al matzot u'morim yochaluhu. You have to eat it together with matzah and maror. So it says al tochlu mimenu na. You cannot eat it raw. That is only talking about korban pesach. Al tochlu mimenu na. The korban pesach you cannot eat raw, but maror, matzah, maybe if it's not fully cooked, that's a different story.
Raw matzah?
You could have that it's not fully cooked, maybe. Okay. Matzah is not necessarily, matzah is not necessarily, the the way we have it today, yeah.
The soft stuff is not raw.
No, I know, but I'm saying you could have matzah that's a little bit undercooked. Okay. Either way, that's one mimenu. V'chad ligzera shava. The second mimenu is available for this gzera shava. V'chad, and the other mimenu lemanda amar baha katuv liten lecha ase achar lo ta'ase. According to the opinion that says that this, right? It says lo totiru mimenu ad boker v'hanotar mimenu ad boker b'esh tishrofu. That there's an aseh. There's a lo ta'aseh of lo totiru mimenu that you cannot leave over from the korban pesach, and then there's an aseh of if you leave over, you have to burn it, right? So it's called a lav hanitak la'aseh. There's a lo ta'aseh, but it's connected to an aseh. So aidi dichtiv notar ktivnami mimenu. Once it's saying hanotar mimenu, it says lo totiru mimenu. So when it says the aseh of burning it, it also says mimenu. There's another opinion that learns the pasuk a little bit differently, and he learns that litin boker sheni lisrifato, that it says hanotar mimenu ad boker ba'esh tisrofu, that ad boker is coming to teach me that you cannot burn the korban pesach on the morning of Pesach. You're supposed to eat the whole thing at night. You can't burn the leftovers on Yom Tov, so you have to wait another day and burn it. So according to that opinion, that's what's being learned. So Aidi de Ktiv ad boker, Ktiv nami mimenu. Once it says ad boker, it also just says the word mimenu. But the point is, we have a mimenu from Korban Pesach. It says mimenu 3 times, and one of them is available for this Gzera Shava. Now, what about on the other side? We're connecting Pesach to Maaser. So what about by Maaser? What about mimenu by Maaser? Is that also available? So tlata mimenu k'tivu b'maaser. 3 times also it says mimenu by maaser. It says lo achalti be'oni mimenu, lo bibarti mimenu betameh, v'lo natati mimenu lemet. So 3 times it says mimenu by maaser. So chad legufe. 1 is for itself. V'chad le de Rabbi Avau am Rabbi Yochanan. 1 is to teach me the halacha of Rabbi Avau Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Now, what was the halacha of Rabbi Avau Amar Rabbi Yochanan? So, Rabbi Avau said that you're allowed to use truma as fuel, truma temea as fuel, but you cannot use maaser that became tameh as fuel, because the pasuk says lo bi'arti mimenu betameh. I didn't use the tameh maaser as fuel. So we learn from the fact that it says mimenu from maaser that by truma you are allowed to. B'chad le de Reish Lakish, and the other mimenu is for the halacha of Reish Lakish. Amar Reish Lakish, Amar Rabbi Simai, minayin lemaaser sheni shenitma shemutar lusocho. How do we know? He teaches. How do we know that maaser sheni that became tameh, that a person's allowed to use it to rub on his body? How do we know that?
What?
Meaning that maaser sheni that became tameh, that even though he cannot eat it, but he's allowed to use it to lather his body. How do we know that?
Why would you take like wheat and rub your body with it?
No, it could be oil.
Oh, well.
Wheat? Wheat.
It's not specifically.
Okay, talk about wheat.
No.
Does that
Shouldn't-
apply? Would Meiser Sheni also apply to wheat or something? Just wondering. Because they said, like, would you have to give some to the
Shouldn't-
Kohanim?
Shneimar.
High first.
Shneimar.
Like, it's for every crop, right?
Shneimar lo natati mimenu lemet. I did not. The pasuk says, I did not give it to a met. So lemet hu de lo natati halechai dumya de med natati. It seems like it's saying I didn't. You have to say I didn't give it to a met. Well, how can you use it for a met? What's something that you could use? Maser sheni. Part of yes, he's the part of what the person says. He says lo achalti beoni mimenu. I didn't eat it when I was in Onan. Lo biarti mimenu betameh. I didn't consume it when it was tameh. I didn't use it as a fuel when it was tameh. V'lo natati mimenu lemet. And I didn't use it for a met. So that's coming to teach me something. What's that coming to teach me? That I didn't use it for a met, but it sounds like if it was a living person, it could be used in the way that it would be used in a met. Now, how could it possibly be used for a met? You can't eat it, but you could lather his body with it. So you could rub it on the body.
What's wrong with that?
So it's coming to teach us that that's asur to do. You can't use maaser in that way for a met, but for a living person you could. That's what's coming to teach us. That for a living person you could. That's Reish Lakish. That's what we learned mimenu. Mimenu.
Are we allowed to do that? If something's excluded, we would assume that the other part's okay.
You have to have, in most of the time, yeah. So lo natati mimenu lemet. Lemet hu de lo natati halechai dumya de med natati. But for a living person, in a way that it could be used for a met, natati. He could use the maaser sheni. So eze davar sheshaveh b'chayim u'metim. What is something that can be used equally for a living person and for a dead person? Have omer zu sicha. It sounds like this is sicha. This is rubbing or lathering. So matkif la marzutra. Marzutra just asks on this, and he says, "What are you talking about? There's something else that is equivalent for a living and dead. Maybe what it means when he says lo natati mimenu lemet, I didn't use it for a met, he means I didn't trade it in for items to be used for a met. This maaser sheni, I used it for myself. I traded in the maaser sheni for money or for things that I ate in Yerushalayim, but I didn't trade it in for anything for a met. Right? Maybe that's what he's saying. To buy an aron or to buy shrouds to wrap the met. So Amar Rav Huna Bereid Rav Yoshua mimenu migufo. Rav Huna says no. Mimenu means from something that it itself is being used for the met, not something that you're trading in for the met. Meaning we're talking about using actual maaser sheni for the met. So that would be lathering, not trading in maaser sheni for something else. Vashi Amar lo natati dumya lo achalti. It says lo natati, and it also says lo achalti. So lo natati mimenu lemet, that I didn't use it for a met, is similar to lo achalti. It has to be a usage where it's being consumed. Malahalan migufo, just like by eating, you're consuming the actual item. Afkan migufo, also over here, when you're lathering, it's migufo, you're using the actual item. Okay, but either way, the point is, we said there's 3 times it says mimenu by Pesach. One of them was available for a drasha. There's 3 times it says mimenu by maaser, but none of them were available. They're all being used for something. So says the Gemara, if you're trying to make a gzera shava to connect Pesach to maaser, va'akati mufne mitzad echadhu. It's mufne mitzad echad. It's the pasuk is it's a gzera shava, but it's the only on the side of Pesach is it a mufne? Is it available? Are we able to make the drasha? But on the side of maaser, we don't have an extra mimenu. So Gemara says, that it only works according to the opinion that says when you have a gzera shava like this, that only one of the sides of the gzera shava, the word is available, that you learn. According to them, fine, then it works. Ve'en meshevin, we don't, right? According to that opinion, they hold lemedin ve'en meshevin. You could learn the gzera shava and you can't make a. It doesn't matter if one of them is more strict or one of them is not and the other one is not. You can't you can't ask on it because you have a gzera shava. But according to the Aman Damar that says you can make a gzera shava, but if you have a response to it, you have a reason why you can't learn. For example, in our case, Pesach is more strict than Maaser. So Meshevin, so you respond, you answer the you answer the limud, and you have a way out. So Ma'ikal Meimar, what are we gonna say? So the Gemara says, Hachtar be'avau midrav Nachman amar Rav bar Avua nafka. One of the mimenus was used to teach me a halacha of Rabbi Avau. What was the halacha of Rabbi Avau? That mimenu from maaser you cannot use as fuel when it becomes tameh, but truma you could use as fuel when it becomes tameh. So the Gemara says that we actually don't need the word mimenu for. That we learn from someplace else. Damar Rav Nachman, meaning that we don't have to learn from the way that Rav Huna learns it, or Rabbi Avau learns it. We could learn from a different source. Damar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav bar Avua. Mai dichtiv va'ani hine natati lecha et mishmeret trumotai. The pasuk says, "Ani hine natati lecha et mishmeret trumotai." I gave you my mishmeret trumotai, my terumot. So we're talking about to the kohanim. Right? Bishtei trumot hakatuv medaber. Pasuk is talking about two trumot. Achat trumat tehora, v'achat trumat temeah. Talking about trumat tehora and also trumat temeah. V'amar rachamana lecha, and the pasuk says natati lecha, I gave it to you for a use. Shelcha teheh lahasaka tachat tavshilecha, that it should be used for you for hasaka, for burning under your tavshil, under your stove. Meaning you're allowed to use it as fuel. You're allowed to use truma teme'ah as fuel. That we learn from this pasuk of natati lecha et mishmeret trumotai, that I gave to you my trumot, even trumat teme'ah, it's for you to use. You could use it as fuel. So we don't need to learn that from the word mimenu. Therefore, the word mimenu by maaser is available for this gzera shava. So at the end of the day, it comes out that we learn maaser from Pesach, just like by Korban Pesach, an arel is not allowed to eat Korban Pesach, and it says mimenu. Also by maaser, where it says mimenu, an arel is not allowed to have maaser sheni. Okay, these dapim are not, a little bit confusing because they're topics that we're not so familiar with, and a lot of drashot, but in a few dapim I think we have some stories. Story of Shlomo, of David HaMelech.